And I was reading in your work the importance of human connection at making us, I guess, generally more resilient, but in many ways insulating us from the likelihood that a traumatic event is going to leave a chronic imprint inside us.
I think insulate is a bit of an extreme word here.
Okay.
It helps. It makes a significant contribution.
Yeah.
But insulate is too total a word. But overall, when you're a kid, for example, and you need to go through an operation or terrible things happen to you, and your parents are there for you and acknowledge it, then that kid is likely to be okay.
Yeah.
It's true that people are beginning the concept gets inflated, and people spin too much on trauma. Also, in some ways, at the same time, trauma is a very real issue. Let me give you an example. I live in a county in the mountains of western Massachusetts, and I gave a big public talk. And after the school principals of this area invited me to meet with them, and they say, can you set up a clinic for traumatized kids? And I asked them how many of the kids in our county see domestic violence, witness people overdosing on drugs, get beaten up at home? And the school principals said, about half of our kids. And my response then was, then you should not have a clinic for traumatized kids. You should have a school system that helps traumatized kids, which is at least half of your population, to really learn to regulate their bodies and to you need to have a trauma-informed school and not treat it as an individual problem, because it's largely social problems. And so once you understand trauma, you change the workplace, you change your schools, you change your hospitals, and you really start paying more attention to the issue of individual safety and agency to help people to function.
Yeah. Now, with the term trauma, I think most of the public would understand intuitively if someone's been to war, let's say, we would say that's a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
But what about something that I think pretty much anyone who's ever been in a relationship will experience something like this at some point, when their partner says something to them that may well be on the surface quite trivial, but for some reason, the other partner disproportionately reacts. Maybe they're being reminded of when a parent criticized them when they were 5 years old, and when their partner says something, it isn't about what the partner said, it's about the feeling that evokes, very, very similar to what you just mentioned, that happened when you were a child. Can we say that is trauma as well?
Well, no, I would say it's part of that experience. But I'm glad you brought up this example, because about a third of all couples engage in violent interactions. So a lot of people carry a lot of trauma, and in relationships it comes out. And once you become intimate with somebody else, you live with that triggered behavior. And some things may be extremely upsetting for your partner, who may become very angry or shut down in response to things that you have no idea what was so awful about it. And at that point, once you become trauma sensitive, you can go like, oh, my partner is not just being nasty, mean, and horrible. My partner gets upset by something that has very little to do with me. And then you can really take a step back and say, honey, let's go for a walk before we address this, or let's play some tennis together, or let's sit in it for a moment, or talk to somebody who else about what's going on here. So you get the heat of the situation. You decrease the heat of what's going on. But it happens in relationships all the time, of course.
Yeah. In fact, in my experience, at least, I see this playing out in people's close personal relationships all the time. It's, of course, it could be about what's happening in their relationship, but in my experience, it's very rarely about what happened in that moment. It's what that is making that other person feel. Which is why I think your work is so important, both for people who have experienced trauma, but also for people who want to help their loved ones who have been traumatized.
Yeah, yeah. And indeed, it comes out in intimate relationships. Most people are able to organize themselves pretty well in neutral conditions. And for example, I have no idea that whether you become violent in your personal relationships or not, you don't know that about me, because we don't have the sort of relationship where we would get triggered about these very core issues. It's not until you really negotiate very complex issues about that happens in close relationships that these issues come out. So it gets contained within relationships, and I keep urging my colleagues who do outcome studies to always not only ask people themselves but how they react, but ask their spouses or their loved ones, because they oftentimes can say more about people's irrational reactions. The nature of trauma is that you get stuck.
Yeah.
It's not. Some people have the misperception, it's that event. And once you resolve that event, everything will be fine. No, trauma changes. That event is over. The problem is that your brain doesn't know it's over, and that you continue to behave as if this event is still occurring. So then the question becomes not processing that event, but living in a body that feels safe. And having a mind that gets rewired to be primarily engaged in the present and not in the past. And so it's very challenging because when your mind, your brain, your whole system is organized to deal with an alcoholic father or a violent husband, you don't really have the capacity to think about anything else. And so to some degree, you could define trauma in many different ways, but also as a failure of imagination, of new possibilities. And so a very important part of therapeutic interventions need to be to really open people up to new possibilities. And to my mind, that's increasingly an experiential piece. Psychotherapy is important. It's important to have somebody who validates your story, who helps you to understand what's going on with you. Very important part to find language for yourself, but understanding why you're messed up doesn't make you less screwed up. So, now I know why you're so screwed up. And so it's just quite helpful, because once you know why you're screwed up, you might be able to think, but maybe if I do that, I may feel better. And so you still, the job of healing is really your own job. And when you try to recover from trauma, you need guides and coaches, but at the end, it's up to you. Nobody. I just came off a podcast and said, "So, Dr. Van der Kolk, why don't you prefer behavioral control?" And my answer was like, I can barely control myself, let alone control other people. Living my own life is tough enough.
Limited intervention, yeah, totally.
So my job is to help you to find your way of leading a life. And your life is different from my life, and your talents are different from my talents, and your resources are different. So it's all a question of what it is that you will help you to be fully alive right now. And a very important part of that is open up people's imagination. Because if you cannot imagine something, it doesn't exist. We create opportunities for people to explore their creativity.
One of the things that has most struck me about your particular work is how creative it is, and how you, in a kind of parallel process yourself to what you're helping people do, have been willing, really more than I think any other major figure in the field, to draw on different forms and modalities of various kinds, psychodrama here, psychedelic assisted therapy there, many things in between. That's been really quite remarkable. So when you bring it...
That's very simple. I grew up in a fundamentalist family. My parents were very smart about fundamentalists. And from a little kid on, I go like, hey, Gerd, there's not only one explanation. Just because you're born in this village over there and everybody believes what you believe in doesn't mean that you're better than people in India who grew up in a different village. And there are many ways of doing it. People have always tried to deal with trauma. And in every community, you find interesting healing practices.
Right.
And the healing practice that you may apply in Gola may not be particularly good in New York City. And so you need to really see what do people need within the cultural context that makes sense to them.
Right. So to engage imagination as this creative, reparative act, that involves agency. That involves, as you say, taking that initial responsibility for oneself, which is, of course, as you well know, really alarming in the beginning often for people, because it was actually that agency sometimes that was punished and traumatized when they were young. So what have you seen about helping people light the pilot light, as it were?
So there's many different ways of doing it. Where we start in our work is in embodied self-awareness, to know who this creature is, to get to know this creature, to get to know what different things mean individually, to actually have a relationship to that creature who you are, and to be very aware of what uptightness feels like and how you can change it, and what happens inside of you, and what touch feels like, what breathing feels like, and to really, when you look at like for the ACE study, where people find all these different things that go wrong after trauma, what they have in common is people not being in touch with their bodies and not honoring their body. So they take drugs and they starve themselves and they don't sleep enough and they do all kinds of stuff. That are a sign of disrespect for your own body. And so learning how to really have a loving relationship with this creature, that you oftentimes blame for what has happened to you.
Yes.
And you feel very ashamed of because that creature becomes so angry or so frozen or so scared, and that nobody else can do that for you. I can be compassionate with you and nice, but once I'm not around, you need to do it yourself. And so the big issue is, how do I feel myself? And so in terms of treatment, we're very much into helping people to feel who they are, and at different stages, how they got to be the way they are, what it's like to change things, to be your breathing and touch, to really change your, help people to get a more loving relationship to themselves. And of course, all good treatments have that in common. IFS does that also, somatic experiencing does it. And so they all have that core idea of your relationship to that creature who you are.
Healing takes time, and you don't have to do it alone. If this message resonated with you, know that your journey matters. Be gentle with yourself. Keep exploring and surround yourself with support. If you haven't yet, subscribe and join this community. We're in this together. And before you go, comment, "I am healing to affirm your growth. You are seen. You are valued, and you are not alone."